Bear.
Howdy.
How goes?
All right, I was just catching a news story that may be of some interest to you, but it begins only as a controversial law in the state of Texas, but it has to do with whether or not sites like YouTube have the authority to censor content. And Texas passed a law forbidding censorship of content by media companies, and it's in the courts at the moment. But
so what does that do to Fox News in Texas then?
well, it basically says that if you allow the public to comment, the editor can't restrict that. So, for example, if you're allowed to put comments on YouTube, because you're invited to put comments, then YouTube, according to this law in Texas, YouTube couldn't turn around and censor them. And the big companies say, wait a second, you can't take away our right to regulate content. And so it's a First Amendment issue. I think it will probably fail because it's just a state law that's going to work its way up, but it should be of interest just for the arguments pro and con. You can sort of
based on what you said, I don't have any problem with the law.
I think you would prefer it.
Censorship.
Yeah, you would prefer that Facebook and YouTube cannot censor comments added by participants. My prediction is that this that the U.S. Supreme Court, if it ever gets that far, will not uphold the Texas law because that makes it essentially available to all the states. I'm guessing that it'll fail, but that's just my impression. You go ahead and read the, here, I'll put a link into the story that I'm reading.
Yeah, well, again, I think the key word there is censorship. It depends on what that means in the context of this law.
Yeah.
So I think that if you disallow false statements and lies, I think that's absolutely preferred. You should not do that. People should not be lying. They should not be spreading falsehood. They should not be,
yeah, or libel and things like that. So yeah, that's why I think that this Texas law won't survive because it's too broad. But it's of interest simply because they'll be arguing the fine points of under what conditions the media company can restrict comments. And I mean, for example, on NPR, they'll bleep you if you use certain bad words that you're not supposed to allow to say on the air, which is a kind of censorship, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's stupid also.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, it's the whole, I mean, in a lot of countries don't have First Amendment. So you can't, criticism is allowed up to a point, but not criticism that falsely maligns people. Where in the US, they keep doing fact checks showing so-and-so said this, one of the right-wing guys said this and the fact check says it's wrong, but then you have this, blowing up the, the falsehoods. And
You're
you
not
get
allowed to fact check, in my opinion. An organization is not allowed to fact check if they themselves are spreading lies.
Yeah,
if they
fake
don't
fact
understand
check.
the definition of lying,
Right.
They're not allowed to fact check.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
it's not a law, but that would be my guidance.
Right. I'm just bringing it up because I think you'll find the whole arguments probably of some interest, but I think the Texas law is too broad. Will probably be seen as too broad.
Hey, so welcome, Josh. I have one topic once we check in.
All right. Which law are you guys discussing?
Texas passed a law allowing Oh, this is interesting. While I was looking for the other stories, I just found another law in Texas, but what's the other way? Court rules in favor of Texas law allowing lawsuits against social media companies. So this is yeah.
Why
Social
should they
media
allow something that's already legal?
Social media companies cannot censor stuff that they could be sued if they allow. So Texas has got two. This is what you call, I think, antinomy. Two laws which are sort of mutually contradictory. One says you can't censor things, and therefore people can sue you for permitting something that you should have censored. So you get two laws which are sort of pushing in opposite directions. That's what's called antinomy in the law, mutually contradictory laws. And let me just see
Isn't that
what's
almost
the
the definition of a fine line?
well, I mean, it's just that in looking for another article in this first law, I found this. So these probably will both go up the line, but oh my God. I mean, this basically makes it such that media companies simply say, we can't afford to be in business because we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't.
That's completely fine. We should take education, transportation, healthcare, political system out of Florida and Texas and Mississippi and a bunch of these other states, and they can secede. I want them to form their own nation. I want them to just go and create their own success.
Yeah.
Okay. We shouldn't have to argue with them about common sense and laws and facts and, the Constitution. It's just a waste of time. So if they want to just practice their own legal system, just like the Taliban, they should be given their own country and let's see what they do with it.
Well, I don't know. I have to think about that, but
no, literally, I think if we had the ability to let them secede, they could then just ignore mask guidelines and ignore vaccination guidelines and ignore healthcare and ignore education. I want them to create that country. I want them to create that nation.
The balkanization of the 50 states. All right. I mean, yeah, I've read on that, like the country of Cascadia, which is what, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and maybe British Columbia. I don't know.
Yeah.
The balkanization of the North American.
I mean, look, if we truly believe in the 1963 UN self-determination quote unquote laws, then we should allow this.
Yeah. So then you're going to have counties within states seceding from the state. Boy, oh boy, you can just see, the balkanization of the governance units of the planet within countries, within states or provinces, within counties, that cities secede from the county.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's completely fine. And if they choose not to follow the Constitution, then they should not be asking for federal funds. They should be setting up their own systems the way they think is right and fund it themselves.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seceding from the condominium board of trustees that governs me. I'm in loggerheads with them, but I don't think I know that I can't do that legally. I can't do that. I can leave the condominium. I can sell my unit, but I can't secede from being governed by them. It's like, if your governor is a tyrant, you can't secede from the government. You basically got to leave the jurisdiction where the tyrant's in charge.
Anyway, I think Heiner's got his hand up. I saw his hand.
Also, has his eyes closed. He's wagging his finger at us.
Shaking his finger.
I think he's still in bed. Looks like he's sleeping.
Someplace dark. Anyway, anybody else want to check in? I could let you guys know on a small little detail. We've been losing ducks like crazy. I think there's a lot of predators out here in the south end of the island. So when I got here, there were 19 ducks. We're down to 9 of them. So we've lost 10 ducks in the last 3 months. But we've therefore allowed one of the hens, do you still say hens when it comes to ducks? So we've allowed them to hatch 4 little ducklings. So we have 4 little ducklings running around. They're about this big right now.
So you're sure it's predators and not duck nappers?
Well, we've talked to the neighbors, and the neighbors have been there longer than we've been. And they're pretty sure it's coyotes. They just come and occasionally, about once a week, nab a female. They never take a male duck. They always take a female duck. I don't know why. So that's probably enough to keep the predator alive. But they don't believe it's humans snatching up.
Is their
female
coop
ducks.
locked up at night?
No, I mean, it is closed, but we don't actually lock it. But
So-
it's not nighttime that they disappear. It's during the day.
I see. Let's see. That's interesting. I guess you can put security cams out there to see if you can spot the coyotes.
I could if I was in town long enough to do stuff like this. Basically I'm here for about 72 hours on a weekend, then I go back to California. So I'm leaving again probably in about what time?
Certainly, you can certainly research the issue and discover if there's any defenses against roaming coyotes.
I should set up a Squid Games for coyotes.
Well, I don't know that they would obey the rules of the game. But you have to have fascists in charge of the game in order for it to run.
Anyway, my daughter also starts school in about another 4 days.
Oh,
Second year.
starting late there. It started here in the middle of August.
Yeah, and you guys get up super early. Here, we don't get out till like the first or second week of June.
Okay.
Well, Barry, you were touching on a topic yesterday. Unless anybody else wants to check in. Josh? I know.
Heiner is, I think, clambering out of bed, going outside to his garden.
With 2 connections to the session.
Yeah.
Okay, so Barry, yesterday I heard you say a few things that indicated, I guess, a position where you thought we were not making progress. And again, this morning there was a text from you that said we weren't making much progress, or maybe that was last night. So I was going to invite you as a systems thinker, what you make of this position of, and I'll push a button here. I'll call it despair.
Yep.
Or
Fair enough.
minimum negativity.
Yeah.
And I was going to invite you to look at that as a systems thinker.
Yep. Actually, that was echoed by a number. In fact, the word despair came up in Jerry's Thursday morning open global mind conversation that several other people mentioned. In fact, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the video from Jerry's Thursday morning, but the thing about hopefulness versus despair, hope and despair are kind of polar opposites to a good approximation. And the youngest person there, who was a female, her name was Jessie Up, I believe, was expressing hopefulness that we would solve these problems. And the older people were expressing the waning of hope as one ages and one gets more and more experience and observation, that the hope fades and dwindles and eventually the despair outweighs the hope in terms of the balance of the two. And that's sort of been my experience, that, you tend to be optimistic, more optimistic in your youth and more cynical in your aging as you see more and more episodes of things going awry, going off the rails. And so I think that this hope and despair thing kind of drifts in the despair direction with more and more experience. And that's been my observation. Go ahead, Sam, you can interrupt me.
No, I want you to finish first.
Oh, so I'm just simply saying that, in fact, in that list of a dozen plagues, originally I wrote 10 plagues, and despair was not one of them. And when I added 2 more towards the end, despair was one of the ones that I added after like another 5 or 6 years of, modulating this list. I guess I can look. So things like abuse and despair were sort of late additions, I think. Okay, you start off with the ones that have been in the literature for millennia, the ones that theologians first looked into: violence, oppression, injustice, okay, corruption, things that have, been talked about for forever. And the last half a dozen or the last 3 or 4 are relatively modern plagues that have become more and more salient. And so people talk about being traumatized, I mean, look at the issue with the suicide rate and all this kind of stuff. So you have these things like terrorism, abuse, despair, that weren't in the list originally, that sort of emerged later on. I mean, look at the lockdown with COVID, and people really got discombobulated over this. And so my observation is these are more emerging in our own time than the ones that have been around since the dawn of history. But maybe the newer ones are more problematic because people didn't really talk about them until quite recently.
So if you're complete, I know Heiner has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Heiner.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I fully resonate with you, Barry. I call it the multiple crises, and you call it the plagues, but I think it's the same.
Yeah, it is just a synonym. Yeah.
I just want to touch base a little. I'm still breathless. It's only once in my life I was so exhausted, but I'm really high flying. Everything is fine. The topics you raise about the Balkanization is very, very central to me, not only because I'm in the Sarajevo like every Sunday, but we have it on all scales. And this splittering, not lumping, this group, I mean, now Stacy is not here, is very, very central to me. I had 4 depressant putting me down under the belly things the last 4 weeks or 8 weeks. So I don't want to talk about this anymore. I just want to tell you, I love to listen to you. I will put on the audio and video, but I was sending to some of you, I think Sam, Stacy, and Barry, a 1-pager, what I have to say in 1.5 minutes for Mila. If you can make it shorten or crisp or terse or whatever you say in English, I have to put myself in a nutshell. I mean, I try to be out of the boxes, but they want me in 1.5 minutes. So if you have a chance to look at it, I will try to get a nap. I had some co-workers sleeping in the other place. So I had to move and the Wi-Fi is down. So I had to go to the neighbor's place. But here we had party last night. It was fantastic about learning through the ages. And this is it. Good to see you.
So I have a
Is it
follow
the
up on
thinker
Barry.
doer thing that you want us to look at?
Yes, you see, Mila has her coming out, and she's now becoming a director or whatever for her country for all the issues like culture, multilingual peace. She's still in Denver, but also in Montenegro. And there she was accepted. And so she was inviting Mahendra, Jörg, me, Jalel, some people you might know, but only me, I don't have time. And it has to be on one page, otherwise I cannot say it in 1 or 2 minutes. So it is me, general thinker and doer.
And you want that boiled down to a concise 1-page, minute or minute and a half.
Well, I will put it on my general thinking page in full, but what they need, and they will cut it after 1:30, is a proposal, which I think you say in English is to the point or terse or short.
Concise.
Anyway, I love wordsmiths, word watcher recommendations. That's why I was sending it to you.
Yeah.
It's
It ends.
difficult and it's my heart blood.
It ends with, I come to present some more details, colon, and then it ends.
You're on
Yes,
mute,
that is
Heiner.
linked to the YouTube video of Falling Walls, where I had at least 7 minutes.
Oh. So you want just the introduction, not the,
Just my, how do you say, elevator pitch.
okay. Well, we'll look at it afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, Barry. Since I asked the question, I have a response to your response. But I was
Okay.
curious about whether, well, I'll follow up on Heiner's as well. But here's the
You're breaking up.
recitation. What?
Go ahead. You were breaking up when you were leaning back, but I hear you better now.
Okay. So here's the repeat of the invitation. Is to look at negativity and despair in systems thinking terms.
Yeah.
So as a systems thinker, or systems model, or a model-based thinker,
Yeah.
how should we engage with the problematique, as Heiner and others put it? Because I hear you sensing or feeling or expressing, at least, that we're not making progress. Now, does that statement serve systems thinking? I submit that it does not. I submit that statements like that are basically confessions of a lack of confidence, or at least a distrust of your own imagination. Now, I'm possibly a little bit too controversial and pointed here, but I'm specifically trying to call out, how should we address the situation as systems thinkers?
I think you need to mute Heiner.
Yeah, Heiner?
Well, yeah.
Okay, one of them
He
went away.
disconnected
One of them
that.
went away. Okay, good. All right. So anyway, in my view, and I'm inviting you to correct me, a position of despair does not serve a systems thinker. And that was the point I wanted to bring up. And I wanted to invite engagement on it. Over.
Yeah. The point I was making is that when progress is sluggish and observed to be slower than one had hoped, what one does is, what are the obstacles that are impeding progress that had not been fully appreciated as obstacles that had to be reckoned with? So my point was, in the observation of that things are sluggish, what are the obstacles that are getting in the way that we hadn't really anticipated and figured out how we're going to reckon with? So it's not that the observation that we are in a state of inadequate progress, which is an observation. Diagnose the reasons why. What are the things that are impeding us, slowing us down, creating these obstacles and stumbling blocks and issues? It's like Judge Eileen Cannon. Who the hell anticipated Judge Eileen Cannon to create an obstacle to an investigation? And so now you have to say, okay, we're not making any progress on solving, the case, because we have this new unexpected obstacle. We now got to face unanticipated obstacles. So identifying and diagnosing the obstacles and reckoning how are we going to remove these obstacles, that's positive. But you can't do that until you say, we have run into roadblocks. We have run into roadblocks. Here are the roadblocks. Here's our analysis of the roadblocks. Now we have to stop and think about how are we going to detour around them or plow through them or whatever. And so that's the system thinking. Don't pretend there are no roadblocks. Don't deny them. Identify them. Diagnose them, and then reckon how to deal with them.
So I agree with that.
Yeah,
I am strongly in favor of that position that you just expressed.
yeah. And
That
that's not
position
to
that
say
you just
should.
expressed
Yeah.
was not one of despair.
It can only be despair if you observe that the reason that you're not making progress is inherent corruption. So, for example, if you could say, well, Trump nominated Eileen Cannon. She has no experience. She's not, she's not really a competent judge. She's not a highly respected judge. And so this corrupt manipulation of the system, this disabling of the system is now the issue. And you go, Jesus, how the hell? The system is dysfunctional in novel ways that are even more dysfunctional than we'd already worked with. And then you say, well, then I despair of using that system. That system has become so dysfunctional that we can't rely on it. It has proven itself to be an unreliable system. So now you have to figure, well, how are we going to replace a non-working system with a working system? And now we're back to systems thinking, which is building a system from the ground up, not trying to fix a inherently broken system. The rule of law is an inherently broken system. We see that. And so now we have looked at other regulatory systems in feedback control theory and other applied mathematics. They say in technology systems, we evolved to high functioning regulatory mechanisms because we're working with devices, not humans. And we can put in protocols and functions, and we can put as sophisticated a piece of mathematics inside the box to run the technology as we like. There's no limit to how mathematically sophisticated we can put the applications inside the computer and the computer network. But there is a limit to how much we can get Homo sapiens to employ sophisticated mathematical mechanisms. How are we going to fix that? And I look at that and I go, my God, I don't know how to fix that.
Sorry,
I really don't.
I'm having trouble understanding right now. Please try a little later.
Hunter,
Was that Alexa listening to me?
Yeah, Alexa is listening.
And Alexa doesn't understand me. Okay, now the machines don't understand me and the humans don't understand me. So now I go, I have to completely find a new medium of communication.
So it's not just
spoken
me,
word. And this is the point. The spoken word is not very good. The written word isn't very good. Maybe computer animations and operas and, I don't know. I mean, I'm really looking at the classical means of communication aren't registering. And so do I have to change to the arts? Do I have to be like Andy Borowitz and do satire and parody? And
Bingo. That was going to be my point.
okay. And by the way, I began thinking about that, 25 years ago when I began writing song parodies.
Yeah, and
Now,
it's not
that
an
is not-
accident. Look, Barry, it's not an accident that the people you and I trust are people like Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert,
Right.
John Oliver,
Right.
way more than quote unquote mainstream media. That's not an accident, because now
Yeah.
it's so idiotic what's happening in quote unquote those formal councils that you just have to mock them.
Yeah.
You know,
But in the practice, in the process of mocking them, we really don't solve the problem. We'll
no,
only
you do
create a new
spread a
entertainment
better
media.
understanding. So if you spread a better understanding and get more people to see the idiocy that's going on with these quote unquote officials in power, then you can actually make more transparent the corruption, the lies, the malfeasance, the abuse of those officers. Just like you were saying about Eileen Cannon or Samuel Alito or, Clarence Thomas. All these corrupt, conniving, hypocritical people who are sucking away the resources that we pay taxes on. We have to expose that. So you're not going to get a solution in one step, as you know, okay? We have to get solutions in multiple steps, and exposure, transparency is one of those steps. It has to go in parallel with whatever else we're doing. And oh, by the way, that's outside the legal system. Mocking the legal system is not working within the legal system, and yet it has influence, and it must be done. And the problem is not more of us are doing it.
Yeah.
We're leaving it to those guys, and Jon Stewart takes 10 years off, and we say, oh, who's going to fill the gap? No, we should all be doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Heiner, you had your hand up too?
Yes, I love you.
I love
You
too.
see, we have to create drama. And I'm with Alexander Christakis, who from Philadelphia went back to Crete to really see the labyrinth and the drama. So it's not the satire. Eric McLuhan was always saying, I'm this guy, but really present the drama. We presented at the Cultural City of Europe, Stockholm, I think in '98, a warehouse theater writing graffiti, which said, drama is a mirror we put forward to society to make them confront issues they tend to ignore. And you see, this fighter, this is what Christakis called Segeris Acritans, this archaic Greek fighter between the gods, is actually a high order. And I must tell you, what is it when you get wrinkles here? All these curves on your forehead. What is the name? When you're getting old, you get all these curves. What is it? Is the name?
I'd have to look it up. Just wrinkles on your forehead, but I don't know if it has.
No, when you get old, you have these wrinkles everywhere, like me now. What is the name?
Aging.
Curmudgeon face. I don't know.
In German, we say Falten.
How do you spell that?
That's in the skin that you have really canyons. But there must be a word in English.
There probably is, but I have to ask a dermatologist. I don't know what the word is in English.
Well, you look so young, so you don't need these words.
But I'm not
But
young.
when you grow older, you will also come to Falten.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
They just say wrinkled. I don't know. Just
wrinkles. Okay.
Just say wrinkled. I don't know. That's just what you say. Old and wrinkly.
Okay. That's me.
So, Heiner, let me ask you, when is the last time you thought that you were in an inescapable position of despair?
Well, I was a couple of times the last 8 weeks. And only when you have experience much more, much deeper than you can overcome it. It is just societal drama, family, internet, cyberculture drama, all this, and they come together. That's why I say it's a multiple crisis. And in the conferences I was last week, they now spoke about we have a triple crisis. I mean, what the heck is this? Christakis, Jansch, Khan, Wolf, problematic predicament of mankind on the merger of all these crises, and not just doing modeling like the Forrester friends we all know with models, but looking into the participatory and normative. We are really into extreme demands of all the scientific groups, and peer review groups are so much in their sweet isolation filters. You cannot believe it. And whoever puts his neck out, you know, management by champignons. So I'm really breathless and out of words.
Craggy faced, you're craggy faced.
The reason I asked the question is to see whether or not you're still in that despair, or whether you pulled yourself out of that despair. And if you pulled out of that despair, how you did so.
I didn't get the last words. How do I?
In other words, if you pulled yourself out of despair, how did you do so? What got you out of despair?
Well, I'm how do you say? Stand-up comedian.
There you
The
go.
harder they come, the harder they fall. I mean, I create drama myself, and I had to create drama myself. So sometimes you have to step back, confront the whole issue, and sometimes point and say no. So the culture of refusal, that's a book we did 1999, is really saying no, not every time, and not to just bypass when you do your legal judicious there in America, when everybody puts his judge somewhere. And then we are back to your topic, like the balkanization topic before. All these issues are one, and that's why we want to address it with Mila. And Mila is as desperate as me, women and stronger.
So that last part, did you say have to address it because women are stronger?
No, I just said Mila. She's maybe 20 years younger than me. Is stronger. I try to go to a better Wi-Fi. Excuse me, I have very big problems with the Wi-Fi presently in the bunker.
I'm wondering whether Skylink will be available in your area.
Well, it's just a matter I
Starlink.
have to solve. I have to solve one problem after the other.
See, obstacles. They get in the way of solving the real problem. You have to solve the obstacle problem, the small problems that are slowing you down.
We have to more or less single thread our way through life. Huh?
Yeah.
There's no more time than 24/7, I must tell you.
And no more energy than one human, the amount of energy you can spend in a day is pretty limited. And you can burn yourself out. You know, this issue of burnout. I'm sure you're familiar with, Sam, with the burnout. If you overdo it for 6 months or a year, you
That's
burn
a
out.
danger, and I'm confronting it. I did not really fully burn out, but it was very often close to survival or not survival.
When what you're doing isn't working, and it isn't working, and it isn't working, it isn't working, you go, well, why am I doing this? It isn't working. I gotta do a Chautauqua retreat and figure out why is the method that I thought was going to work not yielding results. You know, do some soul searching, and you try to come up with some completely novel, innovative approach that you hadn't thought of that might have a better chance of working. And you do that until it runs into an obstacle, until it stops working. And you sort of cycle through, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 different modes of approach. And eventually you run out of time because you get to be 80 years old and it's your day on the stage.
Well,
is
you see,
over.
I'm just 17. So it's not that bad yet. But
You're
we had
17
two
with 60
suicidal
plus years.
situations here last week. And it's really, really tough because people have a high esteem of themselves and they consider, have assumptions and expectations. And then reality, especially for young people, cut in. I'm very much in the bracket of 14 to 22 or 21 to 32. But when women, especially women, go into the climax of 28, 35, 38, then really problem starts. We boys tend to ignore or don't have to face on such a level. So good to be with boys. You have the easier side of life. And you have to raise children and maybe run away when the woman is not budding anymore. Or what do you say? You say blossoming? No. I know about a budding friendship. It's like a flower.
Fading. Yeah, the flower is fading. The bloom is off the flower. The bloom is off the flower.
The bloom is off, yes.
Yeah.
So what next?
Well, then you have to gracefully enter your senior years, and not a lot of people are not very graceful about entering their senior years. For some people, it's a passage that basically derails them, and you know, they retire and go fishing or something like that. You know, they just.
Well, if they have fishing grounds, where very often they are in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Like
Sailing, yeah.
our friend Joshua, he is happily in the wilderness.
Look at how blue the sky is after all those storms you guys had.
Not just
Yeah,
storms,
it's-
fires.
Firestorms.
Yeah, well, you had both. You had storms and you had fires.
Yep.
And then,
Now we got
then
fall.
Alaska got hit by
It's
your
the-
same storm. You shipped your storm up to Alaska.
Well, we try to bring things from Mexico to Alaska. Yeah, it's actually the temperature change that's making it blue like that, Barry.
Really?
Yep.
Is it cooling off now finally?
Yeah, quite a bit. It went from being about 65 at night to now dropping down to 45 at night up here. in the
Wow, that's
mountains.
even colder than it is here. I mean, we got
Yeah.
down to in the 50s overnight lately, but not in the 40s yet.
You see, it is the same with me here. In Europe, especially here around Central Europe, where Berlin is, it really dropped like 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And we always say it in climate research, I mean, 80s, it is the speed and the volume. And this is really killing all living things, because we humans or living things have to adopt.
Yeah.
And that is a real point. 1 degree, we are trying to work on that with natural geoengineering. But even that is very difficult when you MIT guys are running under bad or wrong or whatever deceiving flags. But the main thing is people cannot step back to see broader pictures, and they get through demagogy, media demagogy. McLuhan said media is a massage, not the message. It was just a spelling error on his title. And read the book again. The media is a massage. It is really merging, morphing, manipulating, sculpturing, plastically changing our way of thinking and living.
And distorting it, intentionally distorting it from an objective reality, objective observation to a distorted perception. Go ahead, Joshua.
Well, no, the media cannot be deceptive. It is what we do with the media.
Wait.
Who's gonna, oh, go ahead.
Go
Sam.
ahead, Josh.
I'm just sharing what I've been seeing in the last 10 years. There's a lady, Crystal Ball, who was with MSNBC. She left to do an independent show called The Hill. And then that show got co-opted by the same kind of energy that she left MSNBC for. So she created her own show with her partner called Breaking Points. And then her 2 other co-workers that were left to take over the show after she left, they just left the show called The Hill to come over to Breaking Points. So I just, in the last 6-7 years, it's been happening for 10 years, I'm watching the younger generation say, and this is their point, is the reason they left is they wanted to cover stories in a way that's congruent with reality, as opposed to feed the algorithms of the internet. So on the show that they started to be independent, they still had to feed the algorithm. So they started saying, we've got to put out content we don't care about in order to do the algorithm, but we want to cover stories in the longer format. So what I'm seeing is the younger people that seem to have no attention span on TikTok, blah, blah, blah. That's the massage that Heiner's talking about, is the media is telling us everyone's stupid and everyone's on TikTok. But there is another generation of kids in their 30s that really want to learn. And I invited one of them to GCC yesterday, and I talked to him afterwards last night, and he said, I learned a lot. It was really grateful. He said, thank you to both you, Barry, and to Stacy and to Sam, because the younger generation really wants to learn. And I think that's a message we're not getting out there. That's a massage that we're not massaging into society, of how I talk to these young kids all the time. They really want to learn. Now, do they have the capacity to? I don't know, but they want to learn. So I just want to put that out there, that as far as the despair conversation, is that the longer form conversations are starting to get into fashion. And I think the media is missing that message because of the format that we moved into with computers and algorithms and journalism. And I think the other conversation we're not having that's really important is, in the last 15 years, all the newspapers, like Sam, you were talking about, we need to break off these places. Well, maybe we don't need to break them off. Maybe we need to listen to what's going on in the local area. You'll understand me. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we allowed all of the business, all of the journalism, everything to get consolidated upwards in the pyramid to a small little point. And maybe we need to disseminate it back down, not break off. Maybe we need to spread out and have longer form conversations like we do here. And I think it's important. I think what we're doing is important, having long form conversations. And I see your hand up, Sam. I'm complete.
Well, I'm not sure who it is who allowed all of this, because according to the rules of capitalism, Larger companies are allowed to buy smaller companies. And that was done completely legally. So I don't think anybody ever caught it until it was too late. And now there's a small number of companies that control pretty much 95+% of media outlets. You know, talk about the guy in Australia, talk about Sinclair, talk about, you know, whoever it is. And it's all rolled up. And in fact, Colbert and Oliver do a very good job at times just picking out these little snippets from local community TV shows and just show they're exactly the same words being repeated in almost every community because of this consolidation and all their messaging being driven by central authorities. And we didn't see it until too late, but it was all legal. It was all completely legal in this system of capitalism that we have. We did not anticipate, or actually the founding fathers did anticipate this, but we didn't pay it proper attention. They anticipated that once somebody actually controls your media, you know, they control what the truth is for you or for us. And once you control the truth, you control everything. And that's what's happened. We've got a bunch of people that are, you know, spewing forth falsehood, calling it truth. And 70 million people are falling for it. And we have, therefore, situations that create despair.
But are they really though? Are they really falling for it?
Why else would they
They're
vote for
paying
this guy?
for it.
I got to push back a little bit, Sam. Are they really falling for it? Disgusted they don't care.
Is it my signal or
Calls
is it
for contributions
Josh's
and he
signal?
gets millions of dollars. Build the wall.
I think my signal is getting bad.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Broke
can
up
hear
for
you.
me, but I'm not sure if it's on my side or your side.
It's the whole, it's the whole transmission.
I'm not sure. Check one. Is my
No, I
transmission
hear
bad,
you
Barry? Can you hear
fine,
me?
but Sam has been problematic. Heiner's feed has been problematic.
No.
Well-
My signal is now fine. I'm moving, nomad of the air.
Yeah, you're good now.
I want to go back to Josh. You see, this is a concern how we involve younger generations before kindergarten, in school, in college, in academia, with the challenges of cyberculture. And this really issue really drove me crazy the last 8 weeks. The real eggheads in what we did about cyber democracy 20, 25 years ago bumped into my place, collecting very strange, weird young people. And the problem of languaging, you see, I was used to write with caps because my director general only read texts in caps and it meant emphasis. And I sometimes use question marks and attention marks. The younger generation somehow feels when you use caps in chats, you're crying at them. So there are so many subtle differences inflicted on us through the modern media, social webs. Some are on Telegram and some are on WhatsApp and some are still on Messenger. It is when you experience to the heart in group dynamics where people are about suicide or pretending to suicide and others are pulling the strings, then we are really confronting the issues we had before you came about balkanization and fragmentation, that the whole modern tools we are using now is a tool for separating us, not making us friends and peace. And that is actually this urge, what I'm trying with Mila. And that's why this urgency of adding young people and creative people of all ages, I mean, all generations, all cultures, to really use the new media, but in a responsible format, and being aware of the, how do you say this? I don't have the word. It is the agreements, the ways on how you express, what kind of terms you use, what kinds of emotions you use. And all this is actually with us and Jörg under review in an oral history series. What have we known 30, 40 years ago? And what can it help us for the next 30, 40 years? So anyway, I was sorry that you were not in the beginning when I cried out for help, but this group is really fantastic. So I'm happy to be back.
Bless you.
Mutually agreeable terms of engagement. It turned out to be unbelievably challenging and difficult, if not downright impossible, to come to mutually agreeable terms of engagement in a community with only a dozen people.
It's very hard. I just watched my partner take a group of 5,000, bargain with a large, got $1.3 billion. But what the people they were bargaining with were counting on was that the senior people got the stiff end of the bargain. They know that the senior people will be influence of the vote, and they were hoping the senior people would influence the vote to not take that deal. So they gave them a deal that they thought they wouldn't take, but they ended up taking it. But to unite thousands of people together is a very difficult thing to do. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of communication, takes a lot of knocking on doors, individual conversations, and it takes leadership, and it takes belief in the leaders. And that's what I saw in that campaign. And it could have stretched on for months and months, and it just ended. And I'm very proud of the work that they did. And at the same time, it didn't help everybody. It was some of the senior people didn't got the stiff end of the deal. But knowing that people will not unite together is what keeps the elite, the smallest percentage that's running our world, in power. And it's always been that way through the history of time. So in a time where we're the most connected, having us being the most fractioned off, that dichotomy, that antithesis that you're talking about, Barry, that one law is fighting the other law, I think that if that can break and we can come together, we'll see. And if we don't, then we'll be fractioned off, and supply chains will get fractioned off because the railroad workers will strike, which they threatened to do last week. And so it's a question of, can we all see things in a way that's beneficial to everyone? And I think, one of the voices that's missing in this conversation is Doug Breitbart's "it's all of us or none of us." And that's an extreme other side of it, but we need the pendulum to swing on all sides so that we can get the full spectrum. And I think that's really important. And our age is, I'm turning 50, so I consider myself in your age group with you, Barry, and Heiner and Sam. But I want to know what the 20-somethings are thinking. And I met one of them at the hotel in San Diego, this young kid with bright eyes, and he's going into aerospace, and he's so excited. A little kid from Argentina going to UCSD in San Diego, and he's excited about problems that they should be looking at, and they're just looking towards things that make them happy. And I think we all were guilty of that in our younger age. We didn't look at a lot of these problems when we were younger because that's something we'll deal with when we get older. And I think really seeing things from all perspectives, and the biggest thing I think is happening is that the older voices are reaching the younger voices. And we need that because there is a huge swath of people on this planet that will be passing on in the next 30 years. And if their knowledge is not that they went through the time where we went off of the gold standard in America and changed the entire structure of science, of economics, of everything, when everything shifted and changed, when the president of the United States got into a little helicopter and flew away and said, I quit, they missed that. That's such a huge part of history. And we missed when the president of the United States came on national TV and said, beware of the industrial military complex because it could wreak havoc in the next 50 years. And he warned us. And here we are. I was just talking to a guy with autism, and he was explaining to me how the Department of Defense and the Pentagon have their own separate laws and separate country than the United States of America. And most people don't know about that, including myself. I don't know how they're governed and run, but they seem to run on their own separate budget. There was $6 trillion that were just missing from the United States right before 9/11, and all the papers that were keeping those records were blown up when a big, huge jetliner hit the Pentagon, and in a building right next to the towers that blew up. All of that information is just gone. And so it seems like this industrial military complex is something that needs to get wrangled in, but how do we wrangle that in on the global stage? Not just America, but how does Europe, how does Africa, how does China, how does Russia, how do they even find out what's going on if it's a country that's separate from the United States of America? It's a big question of what's happening in that industrial military complex, because they're still helping a war in Ukraine right now. Raytheon, Honeywell, Rockwell, like all these companies, Boeing, what are they doing? What's going on? Like, are they even being governed? Or do they have rights as citizens of the United States to vote and change the laws that govern people so that it governs the corporations, so that they can do atrocious things around the world? It's a big question of us getting together as a global, like you. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Heiner?
I think it's a real interesting sandbox. And when we looked into transdisciplinarity, the idea was that there were no fences and no excellency agreements, and MIT or whatever got or struck certain deals, but you move and learn the language. And you see, I'm seeing you three as American, which you are not really fully, but I see that the issue of constitution and law and justice in America is such a faint, fragile bubble. What you're doing, what your founding fathers, I think you say, were imagining, having resilience, of having autark systems on various scales interacting, but that's such a unique issue when I see the governance structures in Asia, Africa, South America, not only in the Eastern Europe or Russian or wherever Asian environments. So anyway, this is a unique opportunity, I think, in our times. And that's why I like this move of Mila I mentioned earlier. You were not there, Yosh, yet at that time, to really speak out for her government. And you see, that is my struggling, and this being torn apart between issues and egos and values and languaging. And even we don't have a common understanding of what is a system and what is a world. And these for the UN have been vague subject terms. So in the early days of the UN, such terms were not to be used, were not specified and put into context. So the word crisis on its own was somehow banned. And we did, as NGOs in UN ECOSOC, some campaigns to use the word crisis. We have to confront issues we tend to ignore, but I'm again in the preacher mode. I have to close myself down and sleep a little. But I love you guys. I will make a screenshot.
Mila Popovich.
Thank you, Heiner.
Mila Popovich is the Director General of the Directorate for Interculturalism of the Government of Montenegro.
Yes, you're right on. And we have a party in 2 weeks, a big party. She's with the World Academy of Arts and Sciences and a nugget and a dancer.
I don't know what the population of Montenegro is, but can you imagine any of us having a high-level position in the government of the United States? I mean, that's ludicrous.
That is a unique opportunity. That's why I'm struggling here. To see moment where Lamento said, create leverage points to create issues and turn the tide, or make the clock move backwards.
Montenegro, 621,000 people. I mean, that's twice the size of Omaha, Nebraska when I was growing up. Omaha was 300,000 people. Montenegro was about the population of Nebraska or Wyoming. So I wanted to go back to what Sam and I were talking about.
Heiner
think
appears to be
Heiner's,
speaking, but not audible, unfortunately.
Did you pull the plug on your microphone, Heiner? Because I heard a lot of noise, like your microphone cord was getting wrecked up.
This must have been the aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
it's the
Now you're
aliens.
plugged back in.
You're back.
So whose turn is it
Can we
to
hear you?
talk?
I don't know. We'll just blame it on the aliens. Can you still hear us, Heiner, and you're able to talk? I don't know.
I'm fine.
Okay. So
Go ahead, Barry.
we were talking about, I mean, in 1957, the Russians put up Sputnik. And as a result, I rode the wave of ramping up science and technology and mathematics and engineering education in this country. And I got a damn good education, thanks to the government reacting to Sputnik. And I learned a ton of science and technology and engineering and mathematics right when it was really, really crucial for America. And I got myself a
Excuse me, what was the age? 60?
What was the age of what?
When was this? 1960?
1957.
1957, they put up Sputnik when I was in 7th grade. And so we ramped up the education of the STEM disciplines starting in 1958 or so. And I rode that wave all the way to grad school and beyond. Got a damn good job at Bell Laboratories where I could really use all that great education to build a first-rate domestic telecommunication system. It was the voice telephone system, but that was what I worked on. And you might have said, well, Barry, you were a hero. You basically rode this great wave of science and technology engineering, and you helped build a really good telecommunications network, and everybody stood up and applauded, and you won these awards. 30 years later, the government turned around and said, Barry, you're a criminal. You have built an illegal institution, the Bell system. It's a monopoly, and that's un-American. 30 years they went from I'm a hero to I'm a criminal. What the hell? What? And I stopped developing, the planning of the telephone network, because all of a sudden the domestic telephone network was an illegal enterprise, according to the US government. And that was the beginning of the dawn of despair for me. What the hell is the government doing? 30 years they say, learn to build high technology systems that are high functioning. And I do that. And they say, you build a high functioning, high technology system, and that's un-American.
What year was this, Barry? Are you talking about 94 or what year?
They filed the antitrust suit in the mid 70s, and it lumbered along for about 5 years. And then shortly around 1980, the Bell system agreed to the divestiture date. And as of 1984, there was no more Bell system. It split, it sundered, it balkanized and sundered. And there was no Bell Labs anymore to do the planning on behalf of the nationwide system, because there was no nationwide system anymore. And I was out of work. I had to reinvent myself in the late 80s. And I said, I don't know what to do. Let me go on sabbatical and see if I can figure out how to use this new computer technology in, internet to improve what I learned, science and mathematics education. But I'm not going to get paid for it because nobody's funding it anymore. So I spent the 90s unfunded figuring out how to use computers and the internet to improve science and math education for the young people. And guess what? The young people who had access to the internet in those days, not very many of them, came and they said to me, Barry, we love to learn, but we hate school. I said, oh, no problem. Let's create an online learning community that is separate from the schools, where we can learn anything we want. Model-based reasoning. They didn't know what model-based reasoning was. They loved it. And they had created this text, code and text virtual worlds, and they learned like crazy. They had a great amount of fun. And I reached maybe 500 people over 10 years. That's it. Proof of concept, tiny little demonstration project, no funding. We were totally unfunded. We're running on junk computers that were donated or salvaged from the junk pile. But look, the government thinking skills to, if you have really good thinking skills, you're going to build high functioning systems, which are monopolies, and we can't have that. I mean, now to go back to changing the method, well, that was one change, because I didn't go into the public schools and say, high schools and say, let me teach math and science. No, I didn't go into those public schools. I did it offline. I did it on the internet, apart. But I was still using the same ideas. Now, here we are in the 21st century and writing well-crafted essays and doing mathematical modeling and scientific presentations. The audience is dwindling. And so what I do, I start writing amusing and entertaining essays and song parodies and comic operas, which I have no talent at because I wasn't trained or didn't have any experience. So now I'm no longer giving academic material. I'm now mocking the system with silliness. Now, Sam will tell you that he is not very happy with theology or religions, thinks that they're, have been a very long-term bad influence. Well, I have the same feeling about governments. Governments are really having a bad influence. And so we talk about, well, drama. We have to get into drama. We have to tell really good stories, and we have to do really good quality musicals and stage plays and operas and whatnot. I wasn't the first person to think of that. In Germany, every year, they put on a classical play. That's a part of the culture. Every autumn, they put on a play. And this play is not a new play. Even when the old time religion of the Old Testament was failing, along comes an innovator and he puts on a big drama. And the name of the drama is called The Passion Story. And it woke a lot of people up. And then it got concretized in a document called the New Testament, which is simply a telling of the Passion Story. And I go, oh, that's interesting. But then it kind of faded. It got corrupted. Worked for a few centuries and got corrupted. And then comes along Broadway, and they put on a big musical called Jesus Christ Superstar. And people come and they watch the musical. And it's about this whole story, this passion story. And I go,
not to interrupt you, Barry. My mother-in-law just got back from Germany yesterday. She went to the Passion Play in Germany.
There you go.
I'm just letting you know.
There you go. So I'm looking at, here we go. We go from sober academics and scholarly mathematics to dramas and musicals. And yet look at the content. The content is still teaching ethics and model-based reasoning and superheroes. Comic book superheroes. So first you have Superman and Batman, and then you go back and you have a musical about Jesus Christ Superstar. And here's people trying to introduce higher levels of thinking, ethics, and being a good person. I go, my God. And now we got corruption in government. Are we going to have to go back to another reprise of the Passion Story to introduce people to empathy and compassion and not being venal and corrupt I'm looking and go, my God, I'm going back to teaching theology again, but I can't teach this theology. I got to do it somehow in terms of amusing stuff. I have to do analytic theology, so it's not on faith, it's model-based reasoning, but I got to make it entertaining with musical stuff. And I'm going, and I'm 77 years old. You got to cut me a break. I mean, I had my day in the sun doing it, the scholarly way. Now that's passé. That's not going to work anymore. Talk about obstacles to overcome. I got to keep reinventing myself every 30 years. Well, how many times can you invent yourself if you can invent yourself every 30 years? I mean, now you're 90 years old. It's too late. You've had three incarnations in one lifetime. Saint Heiner.
So Barry, I'm so fully with you. And I think this dichotomy between religion or no religion, it's part of the problem, not part of the solution. I was sending you in this one pager. The issue is, how do we convey it? I mean, what is a conveyor belt? You see, where you were talking so fast and so much that for me, it's sometimes really hard to go back to certain points. Did you mention Bayreuth and Nietzsche when you speak about German?
I didn't mention them by
Because
name,
all
but
these references are
right.
all flicking in my head.
Right. I referred to them elliptically because I didn't say Bayreuth, I didn't say Nietzsche, I said opera and passion play, which is a reference to that, but not by its formal name. Go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah, I just think, I've gotten to know you, Barry, so I follow that 100%. I clearly understand where you're coming from. And especially when you say, I work so hard and the government says, oh, what you're doing is wrong. And the feeling of your life's work being told that it's wrong is a horrible feeling. And I think we've all felt that in our lives. I think we've done some things that we're like, we're on the right track, even for 15, 20, 30 years. And then culture shifts, the world shifts, and we're irrelevant. And that feeling is a terrible feeling. I'm right there with you, Barry, is what I'm saying
That
is,
was the onset of depression. My second half of my life, I've lumbered through low-grade perpetual depression. And that's
Yeah.
the onset of depression. I was riding high, and then the government says, Barry, your whole life is un-American. Your whole profession and being and contribution is now considered un-American. Oh, thanks a lot. What?
it's
Where do
crazy.
I go from here?
Yeah, it's like your parents just eventually say, I don't want you. Thank you, but no thank you.
The system that raised me basically said, we're abandoning that system. We're unfunding that system. We're unsanctioning that system. We built the highest functioning technology system ever seen on the face of the planet. And we were taken down by the lowest functioning monopoly, the government.
Yep.
That was a hell of a hard nut to swallow.
Barry, I'm coming about to learn about you a little better. I mean, every session. This change of the whole life plan of a person, like I always say, I have epochs. Every 10 years, everything was totally different, topsy-turvy. And an understanding that you have been at such a center, because I, through Toronto, McLuhan, or even California or Germany, I always saw that you had there the best and the brightest and the most interesting ideas, like the Exploratorium in San Francisco, early 70s. All these were there with Ted Nelson, Xanadu, or whatever the names we all know, was there, and why it was hindered. And I just want to add one nucleus, because we are now doing a series of oral history. What was there in the 50s, 60s, 70s? What was there and what was blocked? That is actually the third part of the film I'm preparing with Jörg. Challenges 1990, 2020, 2050. Why was it stopped? Who was stepping on the brake? Who was hiding the blind spots, or really putting everything into the poison drawer? We say in German, Giftschrank, something not to reach the public. So all this is very, very thrilling. I'm very excited to be here, and I think we should document it. And I also think I have to leave. So immense gratitude and pleasure. And I think we have to involve the younger generation, like we are trying with Josh, but it has to be really across the scales, multimodally. And those suffering or journey, I think, has to come together. And so I will revisit this recording. Well, I will listen, but I put myself out of the games today.
I'll just tell you one more story, the next iteration. When I come to Boston, and Joshua knows this, I begin volunteering on weekends at the Science Museum. And I develop this puzzle activity. I buy my own puzzles, $1,000 worth of puzzles over 30 years, and I set up the puzzle activity. It is the most popular activity on a Saturday afternoon, very long dwell times. And then around 2015, the Board of Governors of the Science Museum say the volunteers can only do the interpretations of normal, regular, approved exhibits. And they telling me, Barry, you can't do your puzzle activity anymore. It's not one of the standard exhibits that's a standard interpretation. You can stay on and be a volunteer and do what the teenagers do, but you can't do your puzzle activity anymore. Once again, I'm told what I'm really, really good at, what I'm outstanding at, is no longer permissible. Goodbye. You see? Not so in 2016, when I'm now, 70 years old, I got to reinvent myself again. Hi. What are you going to tell the next generation, Barry? What are you going to tell them? Be prepared to be disappointed. That's what I'm going to tell them. Be prepared to reinvent yourself every 25 years. Or maybe, in the 21st century, every 20 years it's going to be. I don't know.
Barry, we're gonna make you a rapper. You're gonna reach the whole world. We'll do some hip hop.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't carry a tune.
That's okay. I got the DJ right there. Ah.
I can write the lyrics and I can point you to the music, but I can't carry a tune. One of my song parodies is called I write the songs, but I don't perform them.
Okay. I got a little girl that's growing up and ready to take on. Yes, hold on one second. There we go.
You'll know that she knows she's growing up when she turns around and says, Daddy, I grew some already.
She just said that. Go ahead, tell Barry, did you grow? She's teething right now. She just had massive fevers and she's got more teeth coming in.
Yeah.
But she's been learning how to use the iPad and getting really good with it. Like,
yeah. See, she's going to start way ahead of me. I didn't get to start with computers until I was in college.
Yeah, I wish those 500 people online you were talking about, have you kept in touch? Meaning, I'm sure you influenced so many people that influenced so many people that influenced, like a ladder effect.
Yeah, actually, there's a group on Facebook that's the alumni. It's not 500 people. It's only about 30 or 40. But yeah, I've kept track of at least some of them, certainly not all of them.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about 1990s. I mean, they're all 35, 40 years old, 45 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
They were teenagers then.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, it's still going on. I was just in a, yes, Boopies. I was just in a pitch room. Oh man. Yeah, I'm gonna have to continue this next week, I think, because yes. I'm gonna go take care of this one. But I'm just saying there's still people doing it to this moment. I was just in a pitch room with Web3 and listening to them talk about nonsense. And there's going to be like millions of people doing nonsense until we get to something decent. And I watched the interview with Mark Zuckerberg. He's growing up a little bit, but he's so trying to create this world that no one wants to live in.
Yeah.
So in other words, I think it's up to the people that are in their 40s and stuff. We're going to figure this out is what I'm saying.
Well, either we figure it out or we go extinct. I mean, our species will go extinct eventually. The question is, will it be sooner rather than later?
Hey, sorry, hold on a second. We put my headphones back in. I'm just saying there's things going on right now that are just mind-blowing, and it's evolving. I talked to a guy in India and he told me the history of hip hop from the 2000s to now the last 22 years. And I didn't even realize there was a guy that spoke to the masses, the rich people and the poor people in Mumbai. And there's so much that's happening that we don't hear about around the world that is just starting to come into fruition now.
Yeah.
I mean, this movement that I was involved in with Burning Man and all these hippies making eco villages, it's when I was I think 10 years ago, it was maybe 3,000. Now it's up over 150,000 little eco villages all over the world. And there's these movements that are just growing. And, you know, I don't want to be a Tesla fanboy, but Elon Musk is literally pushing the envelope of what can be in terms of creation with 3D printing. And this revolution is unlike nothing I've ever seen, where they're printing materials out of new things that we haven't even created yet. They're literally printing with metals and material sciences.
Oops.
Imagine.
Oh.
So, I'm just putting my headphones on. So I'm saying it continues. In other words, a lot of the things in the late part of the 19th century, so the 1800s, a lot of those things are coming to fruition now, meaning a lot of the frequencies of radio, when radio was created, and a lot of the things that you're doing at Bell Labs are still coming into fruition, where people are pointing ham radios up at the International Space Station and talking directly to the astronauts, at that tradition that you're talking about. I mean, these things are real and they're happening, and there's so much that I feel like it's a magic trick while everyone is paying attention to things that don't matter, like he, she, them, they, all this stuff that we're getting in a tizzy about. There's real things happening on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's why I truly love Tesla push the entire car industry. They just came out with the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is a car that can charge at 240 volts from the front of the car. And it will produce power, I think it's 7.2 kilowatts out of a car in the front, and the trunk opens up where you can slide things into where an engine used to be. So there's a trunk in the back and a trunk in the front. And if that's not revolutionary, I don't know what is. I mean, there's never been a vehicle like that until this last month. It just came out and people are receiving it. And that's the beginning of a change of how you move materials from place to place, because before a pickup truck was just in the back. Now it's in the front and the back. And I know these things might seem insignificant, but when you have that vehicle 30 years from now in every part of the world, and people are using it to create power out of the front, and the batteries are being recycled, it's going to be a very different place.
Yeah, in 30 years, I won't be around. So I won't live to see that. 30 years, I will be 107 years old, which I don't expect to live to 107. So.
Yeah, but who knows? 30 years from now, someone might go on the internet and take one of your silly ideas, and it might become the biggest hit song in Germany. Who knows?
That's why I put all my stuff on the internet.
Yeah. So I'm saying just let it become what it's going to become. I'm just saying, please don't despair. Like that's my whole point of this conversation. We talk about hope and despair. Don't despair, because things always evolve and change. And it might look bleak now, but I think every time in history it looked bleak. I think no matter where you stop the needle of the linear history line, things look the bleakest at those times. And yet here we are, and more people are being fed than have ever been fed in the world, ever.
Yeah.
And the nutrients are going out of our foods, but there's indigenous knowledge that's not lost. It's still on this planet. And those indigenous people will help, if they're given respect that they deserve, to move into the giant, large, massive food systems to actually help regenerate the soil on this planet. And there's a movement for that, and it's not as strong as it could be and should be, but let's see what happens over the next 20 years.
Hopefully somebody other than the current white power structure will figure it out. Because the white power
I think they will.
Yeah, well, either they will or we will go extinct.
And we've done I think instead of being mad at the problems, let's look at the benefits that those problems that are problems now, at the time, the problems that they solved, meaning creating enough food for the world. That was a hard thing to do in 1936.
Yeah.
That was hard, and they did that. We have enough food, but the food is not as nutritious as it should be at this point.
And the food is getting so expensive that between rent and food, people don't have enough money to have the basics anymore. I mean, the lowest people who are working at minimum wage, they really, I mean, I was playing D&D the other night with a young professional who's well-paid young professional. She says, I can't afford to buy a house.
Yep.
She says, she wants to buy a house. She says, a house is around here, $600,000. She says, I can't buy a house.
Yeah, well, that's also forcing people to a minimalistic lifestyle of these little tiny houses because they can't buy a house. And that tiny lifestyle could create community and bring and unite people together like it never has.
We'll go back to
we'll see
boarding
what
houses.
happens.
I mean,
Yeah.
my great grandparents were of the boarding house era.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we may go back to boarding houses if you can't afford single family dwellings anymore on a quarter acre.
I'm just saying, please don't despair because, and I'm saying this to everybody that might be watching this in the future.
All
or
I'm
nobody,
saying
but
is that I put in my professional credentials to solving the problems of my era. And I think we did a good job, but now the problems of the next era is going to take, the people who are in their 30s and 40s are going to have to solve that problem. I mean, when I'm in my 80s in 2 more years, I'm not going to be solving these problems. I'll be lucky just to be able to, to function.
well, let's put some of these things, like I keep saying this, but that guy Lex Friedman, I really think if we could get a podcast. I mean, the story you told me about Jimmy Wales, I think that's not over. I think it's really important that ethics, everyone's asking for it from the zeitgeist that I see. Everyone wants to know who is going to be the good person that does something and not the good person that does nothing, that steps up and champions the ethics.
Yeah, I've told all my stories. They're out there. The stories. The thing is that the stories are buried under a ton of nonsense. It's not that you can't find them. If I tell you where to find them, you'll find them.
Yeah, I just watched one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my lifetime, and it got a little bit of acknowledgement, and now it's gone. And it's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I think that movie will be something big 10 years from now. But right now, it just hit. Yeah. It didn't pop the way it should.
Well, I mean, Everything Everywhere Now all at Once. That's the Webb Space Telescope. It sees everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah,
all the way back for 13 billion years. And what I say is the team that spent 30 years developing the Webb telescope and succeeding in a very fabulous technological adventure. Why aren't those people running the planet?
Well, we'll have that conversation. I want to answer that question because that's a great question. I'm going to shelf that. Why aren't those
nothing
people
against the
running
Webb telescope, but people who can do that, people who have that level of cooperation and collaboration and technical, why are people of that caliber running the planet?
Let's shelf that conversation because I have some thoughts about that.
All right. Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Barry, for hanging strong, because what happened to you happened to me in the 90s and the 2000s. And I worked my ass off to make sure the internet did not become a commercialized place where everything just, there was no ethics in how you took people's contact information and spamming.
Yeah.
And I failed because MySpace, the company that started it, they used all their spamming data to start MySpace. And it was kind of sneaky, like, hi, I'm Tom, be my friend. That was sneaky. And I didn't see that coming. We locked down a lot of the internet so that people couldn't do that, but then that reopened it back up. And then the way that they used cold fusion in the back end, and the way the information was taken over to Facebook and then Ajax script, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, I worked my ass off to not let that happen, and I failed. And it continues. So let's see how the laws are going. In California is leading the ways on data protection. We're saying how Texas is trying, but they're being maligned with both of the laws. And what Europe is doing, we'll get there. In other words, it's just going to take a while. It's not going to be in 5 years. It's not going to be in 10 years.
I can predict, just as Sam says, loss of faith in organized religion. I'm going to say loss of faith in organized government as it's been operating for the last, millennium or two. I mean, if a system doesn't work, it doesn't deliver, you lose faith in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lost faith in government the way Sam lost faith in religion.
Yep. And I haven't lost faith in any of that because I keep talking to these people. Like a guy last night thanked me for being humble, this guy from Sweden.
Yeah.
And he was so ignorant. He's like, well, what did Trump say? What did Obama say? What does Biden think? I'm like, dude, that's not America. Just like in Sweden, we don't talk about your government structure. That's not what America is a massive, different melting pot of many, many, many cultures all talking about separate things, and we can't even communicate. And we're learning to do that on these platforms, and these platforms are growing. Like I see you, Heiner, jump into the clubhouse sometimes, and I try to invite you up, but that's a new thing called social audio, which is a brand new thing that just came out in the last couple of years, and it's barely at the infancy. And you take social audio and you move it to DALL-E, where the computer generates the world as you're in it. There's going to be a whole nother layer coming up that is beyond our imagination of how we communicate. And we'll see how that, it probably will play out the same way as social media did and be stupid and a lot of weirdness, or it could fraction off into great groups of people doing great things. Like I have some friends that are really trying to put in metrics of all of this climate change stuff. They're actually trying to build Internet of Things to measure water flow, nutrients in the soil, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. Yes, groups. Go ahead.
There's always so many things which were said. I don't know where to start. You see, we
It's too much. It's too much.
For the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Actually, this measuring was a pyramid in Egypt. We try all this, but it's always an issue of hope and delusion, and people taking over, like I think you say raptors, warps getting to the right piers, the Chinese say. So I really feel I could respond to many things you said, and especially your approach to just using audio, because I really feel we need hands-on encounters, multimodal, this video bridges of just audio or whatever. I just learned with really insiders in the game of voting and democracy and governance, where we tried in the mid-90s, that they are in the danger of misusing the system. Like you were just mentioning, well, they just used your data and use it for weird or whatever purposes. I would like to say bye-bye. Say I would like the three of us to meet again, sometimes very soon, off record, because sometimes it's very good, like Sam always said, he loves to have a group of 7 trustees or friends he can really, 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 really trust. But that is the Chinese idea of the wise people and the bamboo hive. But we are living in a different, totally exploding cyber cultural universe, techno, whatever, with transhuman and whatever alien beings. Anyway, I would like to continue, and Josh, if you invite us, maybe we meet off the records.
Yeah, we can play. I really want to share all these things I'm talking about. I want to put it on a Zoom. I'm on an iPhone right now, but I want to put it on a computer and just show it and let that hope and excitement come up, because it's fun. Like there's so much fun going on. I mean, yeah, the world's going to shit and we're probably all going to die. There's no nutrition and the climate's going to, wreck all of the ecosystems of all the water, and all the humans on Earth will get underwater and we'll all die. But in between, can we just have a little fun? Like enjoy our lives,
Maybe just the four of us with four deep women like Mila, and maybe we should set it on, and maybe we should do it off records first.
Yeah, maybe we'll
Because
figure it
all
out.
this bullshitting is
Uh-oh,
being on
uh-oh.
air is not really for aliens allowing me to think clear and wise.
Look. Sorry, my little daughter was trying to eat a Skipper. Yes, I got to run, so I'm gonna say goodbye. Cheers.
Well, Heiner jumped off. Joshua jumped off. It's you and me. Are we done, or do you have anything more you want to dive into? Just the two of
Too
us.
bad Heiner left so quickly, because I was going to ask him what about being on the record prevents him from being wise
I don't know.
or talking wisdom.
I don't know. Maybe he wants to be candid. You know who Sarah Michelle Gellar is, who played Buffy.
Yes.
So two or three of the women who were her co-stars on Buffy came out and said they were treated badly and abused and all that stuff. And
By her?
no, by what's his name, the guy who runs it, Josh Whedon. Josh Whedon was the bad guy, and she supported them coming out, but sort of stayed away from it. She said that she also had, quote, experiences, which she hadn't disclosed and doesn't plan to disclose. But to say that, she didn't get it off without some kind of, quote, experiences. But she said, I chose not to speak out about them, and kind of hinted why it was not a constructive thing to do, that it would not lead to, healing for her or better outcome. And I thought that's interesting. A lot of people simply suffer through these indignities, or whatever you want to call them, and don't make a big deal out of them, because making a big deal out of them backfires. Doesn't help at worst and makes things worse, And so people just suck up the crap in life and muddle along. And I in my own life, I've sucked up stuff that I still haven't talked about and probably never will, simply because it's too hard to put into words and too hard to explain. It would take too long to explain, and I'm not a good explainer of these things. I can talk about the lesser stuff because I can explain that in a few sentences.
And this is not new. People have been doing this for thousands of years.
Exactly. And so this is where I say fiction is a great scam. You get to tell the truth while pretending to lie. So they map it into fairy tales and stories and narratives and dramas and plays, and they change the name and the character and the time, but it's the same story. The drama is the same. They just don't say, this is my story, this is a story I made up. Okay,
It's plausible detachment, plausible deniability.
yeah, I mean, it's why people make up these stories about being abducted by aliens. It wasn't aliens, it was your uncle or your brother-in-law or whoever. Okay, but yes, I understand. You had this experience by aliens, and and it was a dream. It didn't really happen. Yeah, right. So how are we ever going to get out of this stuff? We can't even talk about the real problems in public, because the blowback, you get what's called victim blaming and shaming. That's really the key thing. That's the reason victim blaming and shaming is so inevitable that it's pointless. And so what you do is you pour it into the arts. You map it into the arts. And I've tried that too. I mean, I've written song parodies and comic operas and other pieces of parables and allegories, which is not anything that I have any talent at. I mean, it's just, but it's therapy.
So I'm just trying to put this into the long view. Potentially, there is value in some of that transparency, but in the short term and in the little locus of my own personal world, yeah, it may not be a net positive to disclose some of those things.
Yeah.
And
The
sure enough,
blowback will blow you over again.
but what I'm saying is, with enough history of people making that personal choice to say, yeah, this is not going to go well for me, but I'm going to disclose it. For example, just this week, there was a story about a young woman in her late 20s whose boyfriend was killed by the very reputable detective in New South Wales, I think. And he was, of course, admired by the community, but her coming out to 60 Minutes, I think a year or more ago, and saying, hey, this guy killed my boyfriend, was a brave thing for her to do. She knew that he had such power that she would not live long after that. And sure enough, 5 years later, she was found dead.
Which is why people wait till they're on their deathbed to tell these stories. Or they
But I'm
map the
saying
stories. Yeah.
she could have lived longer had she
Right.
stayed quiet.
Yep.
She
Yep.
chose to give a story to the media, in this
Yep.
case, 60 Minutes.
Yep.
And that then brought about massive investigation into that police department. And many people were then either indicted or convicted, or at least, fired for all of that, for having, been drug running and judge,
Right.
jury, executioner on a number of other individuals.
Yep.
So
She
over
sacrificed
time,
herself. She sacrificed herself to tell the story. And
So
she
over
martyred
time-
herself. She martyred herself.
yes,
Knowingly
yes,
martyred herself.
that's what I'm saying.
That's the passion story. You martyr
And what-
yourself to tell the truth.
Right. And so over time, enough people who do this, the Chelsea Mannings, the Julian Assanges, the
Reality winner.
reality winner, and then the guy from the NSA, whatever his name was, Ed Snowden, all these guys know that there's a consequence,
Right.
all these people, sorry, know there's a consequence to coming forward with their story. And
Yep.
sure enough, they're suffering for it.
Yep.
But they felt that there was a larger, bigger perspective. And in fact, we owe them thanks for their decision to come
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
You could call that bravery. You could call that courage. You could call that ethics.
Socrates did the same thing. He knew that he could escape and get the hell out of Greece, but no, he said, he says, I'm going to drink the damn poison. I mean, this is a recurring story. The hero that sacrifices for the greater good.
And is it a sacrifice, right? We all have to die for something. Why not die for an important thing? I would ask myself that question myself.
Well, Socrates was in his 80s or whatever when he drank the poison, so he
So
knew that he
maybe-
didn't have long to live anyway. But Aristotle got the hell out of Greece. He went back to Macedonia and died of a broken heart a year or two later. He was so depressed, he died of a broken heart after 2 years. He fled. He fled Greece.
Let me also, while I'm talking about brave people, not ignore the fact that there's a whole flock of elderly Japanese who offered to clean up Fukushima so that the younger engineers could have a longer life,
Yeah,
because they knew that they were at the
they were
end
going
of
to
their
die
life.
anyway. And you also know what the latency period is for getting cancer from, it's going to be 10 years. I'm going to be dead anyway in 10 years. What's the difference?
That was their thinking.
Right. I mean,
So if
I've
you wanna
waited a
talk
long
about
time to tell
ethics-
some of my stories. And I tend to tell stories where enough decades have passed that it's okay to tell them.
But what I'm saying, Gary, I want to bring this back to this question about despair, especially if you are a systems thinker.
You have to point out what's the cause of despair. these
Right.
things happen.
But you don't sit in despair is my point.
You tell the story.
You have to move beyond it.
That's what telling the story does.
Yes. And
But the
then
story
allowing
in
other
telling-
people
Yeah.
to make their own decisions about how they move beyond.
That's how you get out of despair. That's the therapy, is telling the story, and not just to your shrink, but telling the story publicly. And so telling the story is the therapy for the state of despair. But at the same time, it reveals to people that the likelihood of this happening to you is a lot greater than you might have thought when you were young and naive. And you need to, you need to gird your loins against these things, because they're going to happen. Did I say something?
I don't even know what gird my loins means.
Oh, it's a
I
term.
know in figurative terms what it is, but my mind is racing at the derivation.
Actually, there's a video showing somebody wearing a tunic girding their loins. You actually, in order to fight, you got to be able to run. So you lift up the skirts and you tie them around your loin. And actually, it's like tying a tie. You have to tie them in such a way that the garment is no longer hindering your ability to move. And it's like a girdle. You're actually tying the fabric around your waist.
Yeah, but you're girdling your fabric, not exactly your loins.
Well, I was
But,
using a term
I'm
metaphorically.
nitpicking. I'm nitpicking.
Yeah, it's a theological metaphor from, biblical times.
Yeah. I'm just saying, when I heard you speak yesterday and at other times, you were very clear about the state of despair. You were not so clear about moving beyond it. But
Well,
that was the point I wanted.
why do you think I wrote all those stupid song parodies? That's my therapy. That's how I got out of despair.
Okay. I'm glad we had this conversation, because now I understand that about you. Okay. Because I didn't want you to be, in a sense, sitting in despair.
But you don't want to. Well, I mean, the thing is that the issues recur. They recur, and I can point out these patterns, these recurring patterns. So what happened at Bell Labs in '84, what happened in the Science Museum, and what happened in the condominium where I'm living, and what happened in marriage and divorce. I could point out multiple instances of this same running into a brick wall that you didn't expect to run into, and falling flat on your face, and then having to reinvent yourself. And how many times can you reinvent yourself before you run out of versions to.
But by the way, again, part of your interpretation is also part of your story, because I submit to you that the government was not telling you that, Barry, you are a criminal. That's a story you chose to tell yourself.
They
and to
said,
tell others.
they
Wait,
said
Barry,
AT&T
wait. Again, you are so attached to that story, you didn't even want to let me finish. You're very attached to this government told me I'm a criminal story. That's not what they were telling you. That is not what they were telling
I
you.
was working for a criminal enterprise.
Okay, but that's a different statement. That's a different statement than that, Barry, you're a criminal.
But I believed in the enterprise I was working for.
That's completely fine. That's completely fine. But it's not that simplistic. You know it's not that simplistic. You chose to dumb it down to tell a more compelling story.
Yeah.
And yes, it is more compelling. Oh, who would tell Barry he's a criminal? I submit to you that's not what they were saying.
They're saying we were a monopoly. It was an
saying,
antitrust suit. It was an
That's what they were saying.
antitrust suit.
That's what they were saying. Yes, I agree. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's different. Okay. So I'm just asking you that the stories you tell are also the stories you tell yourself.
They're telling us that what we're doing is not heroic, it's villainous.
Very,
What
very,
Bell Labs
very,
is
very.
doing
You're
is
still
villainous, not
attached to that
heroic.
story. You're still attached to that story.
That's why I don't believe in the rule of law.
Barry,
because
you're
it basically,
still attached to that story.
because it's the story of what
Barry,
happened to
you're
me.
still attached to that story. It's the only story you want to tell.
What else? How else would you put it?
I'm introducing a new way and you're not even listening to it.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine who's suffering from lightheadedness falls down. So he says, Barry, don't pick me up for the volunteer job tomorrow, because yesterday I had to scrape myself up off the parking lot in Gloucester. It took me 2 days to decode that. Oh, he got out of the car and he fell down. Yes, I can use euphemisms. Everybody uses euphemisms. And you have no idea what they're talking about.
That's right. And the government telling you you're a criminal is a euphemism.
No,
It's a way for you to tell a story in which you get
it's
to be
a
right.
it's a malphemism.
Yeah.
It's a malphemism.
But you like telling it. So it
Yes.
serves you to tell that story.
But I didn't start putting it that way until quite recently.
But it serves you to tell that story.
For 30 years, I never said anything about it.
But it serves you to tell it the story that way.
Sure, because the people listen.
Exactly.
And if you want to tell people listen, you have to do a passion story. You have to do a dramatic, you have to dramatize it. If you don't dramatize it, people don't even know that you said anything.
I'm trying to say, because this is CSG today, I'm trying, as a systems thinker, trying to double click on that story and go deeper than that. And that's what I'm trying to do here.
The deeper thing is that the system reverses itself. The system reverses itself unexpectedly.
Yes, that can happen. Yes.
And illogically.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect the system to reverse itself in such a dumbfounded, gobsmacking way as that. I mean, they
Okay, so
actually.
can we put it into different terms? Okay, so put aside the story of AT&T. We can go back to that later if you like. Okay, now there's a question of, does Twitter have a monopoly on the town square, for example? Or if
They're not the only game in town.
That's true. Facebook is there also, so you can't.
Bell system was pretty much the only game in town. They really did have a system, because it made sense to have one system. The telecommunications network, everything has to work compatibly with each other. If you had competing systems in telephony, half the country couldn't call the other half of the country.
Okay, so let's take a different example then, since that was a bad example. Microsoft had the desktop operating system, 96+% of it, whatever. It probably close to 99%. Okay, that was a monopoly, right?
Well,
How
except
come the
that
government didn't do anything about that?
well, they tried. They filed an antitrust.
Yeah, but
case.
they didn't succeed.
Yeah, because they gave up. And I don't know why. This is a question. Why did they pursue AT&T, but they gave up on IBM, they gave up on Microsoft, they didn't even go after Apple. I don't understand how they went total, against the telephone network and not against the computer sector.
I also think Google was given a free
Sorry,
ride to
I'm not sure
violate
about that.
copyright. Free ride.
I don't have an answer for
Why?
that.
Again,
Don't have an answer for that.
that's right. Don't have an answer for that.
Alexa doesn't have an answer for that, or whoever that
But
is.
you get my point, right? We don't yet understand these dynamics.
Yeah.
And so simple one-liner stories don't actually allow us to get any insight from that. We have to dig deeper.
I'm left baffled. You don't like me to say I'm vexed and perplexed or puzzled or baffled or whatever. But
No,
the thing
that's all
is, some of
fine.
it is-
I don't have a problem with that as long as we move beyond it.
it's a
Hey,
problem
Barry,
that I don't know
Barry,
how to
can I give you a
solve.
stupid line that I heard this past week?
What?
There's nothing like insight. And that was nothing like insight.
Well, I'll give you a line. I discovered.
Sorry,
I
It
discovered
didn't land. It
didn't land. Well, I'll tell you why it didn't land in a minute. I discovered the fundamental algorithm of the practice of law. First, they shake you up, then they shake you down.
Okay, I've heard that one from you also before.
Yeah, because it's original
Yeah.
for me. You wouldn't have heard it from anybody else.
All right.
One of the best slides in my talk on emotions and learning is the slide on insight. I don't know if you remember seeing it. That's my number one slide, insight.
Okay, I'll go take a look again. Put it on my list. Anyway, Barry, I do think that, and this is again possibly an unfair observation, but I'm trying to see if we can actually get deeper into things. I find that sometimes when I ask a question, I'm inviting a conversation to explore a topic. Too often, I get the feeling that you fire back with an answer that is kind of pat, double quote pat.
Because it's an answer that I've thought about over a period of years.
Okay, so even if that's true, the method to sort of get somebody to understand it is to sort of grow that person's understanding of it, right? Not to say, okay, I thought
But
about
first
it.
I gotta
Here's a
tell you where I
20-page
am.
exposition.
If you want to move me from here to there, first I gotta tell you here. I have to show you here is where I am. If you won't allow me to show you where I am, then what's the point of telling me to go somewhere else?
Because if you're trying to educate me, I would submit that the dynamic is working in reverse. You need to understand where I am and what my level of understanding is, and then move me up to this other level of understanding where you've been 20 years ago.
You can't map out a journey unless you know where you're starting from.
Right. And what
I
is
have
your
to tell
level
you
of
where I'm
interest?
starting.
And what is your level of interest in the person you're having discourse with and where that person is starting from?
Well, I mean, if you're going to give me directions on how to get to a goal state, you have to know where I'm starting from.
But you're giving me directions.
I'm
Because
giving you
I
my,
asked you a question, right? So you're giving me an answer. So you're in a sense giving me the directions,
no,
and you're not interested yet in where I'm starting from.
I'm giving you my location.
Okay.
I'm giving you my location. Because if you don't know my location, then what you're going to say is not going to make any sense relative to my location.
So why not put that location in reference to the question?
It seems to me, if you're going to talk about adopting a new location, you have to reference a new location with respect to the current location so you can map out the direction that takes you from the current to the proposed.
I get it. I get it. But if you want me to take that journey, I'm submitting to you that what you are saying applies to you. In other words, if you want to help me get to your location, which is where you're talking about, then
If you want to walk alongside me, you have to start where I'm standing, and then we can walk alongside together. But if you're going to be over there and I'm over here, we have so much distance between us, we're not walking together. We're in a glare condition. That you're talking about a glare condition. I don't want a glare condition. You want to,
I don't think we're hearing each other.
well, then we're in a glare condition. You know, I mean, this was the official name of the project that I worked on at the Media Lab. Can you read it?
Learning companion.
Yeah, the whole idea was if you want somebody to learn, you have to play the role of the learning companion. You have to walk with them from where they are at the outset to where they agree and you agree, mutually agree to go to. And so if you want to be a learning companion, you've got to start with somebody where they are and walk alongside them from here to there.
That's what I'm asking you to do.
Well, then you've got to start where I am. If you want to coach me, you got to start where I am.
I'm not trying to coach you. I'm not trying to coach you. I'm trying to learn from you. I'm trying to get you to coach me. That's why I asked you a question.
So then my next question is, do you want to walk from where you are to where I am?
Possibly, yes. That's why I'm asking the question.
So then I tell you, well, here's where I am. Do you want to go there? I'll walk with you there. But you say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to know where you are.
That's
Which
not
means,
what I said.
well, I mean, here's the question. Do you want to get from where you are to somewhere closer to where I am? Because then I'm going to tell you where I am. All right.
Possibly.
So I tell you where I am. You say, oh, that's a great place. I'd like to get there too. Or no, that's bogus. That's baloney. That's nonsense. That's a lie. So I don't want to go there. All right, then don't go there.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking the question is because most of these questions that we're asking each other, in my opinion, in my understanding, require a little bit of further elaboration on these terms and words and phrases and nuances before we truly understand even the question. And that's what was a little bit jarring for me, is that without that exploration, boom, an answer already appeared. And that was what I was trying to explore.
Yeah. I mean, if I tell you where I am, you say, well, that's a good goal state. I'd like to get there. Or that's a terrible place. I don't want to go there. Your assertion was, you're in a state of despair. I don't want to go there.
I did say you're in a state of despair, or at least an expressed state of despair, and I'm hoping you don't stay there.
Well, but I also told you how I ameliorate
Yes,
and
I got that.
therapize
I got that.
myself.
I got that. I got
Yeah.
that, which is good. I'm glad I got that. But the multiple times I've heard you state these terms in negative / despair terms, you didn't indicate the movement beyond.
You should have
And
seen,
that's all I
you
was
should have
saying.
seen how depressed I was at the outset. I
So
mean,
you're saying
there were days I
this,
couldn't even get out of bed.
you're saying this is jolly compared to that, right?
This is, what's the word that they adjusted? This is adjusted. You know, when I went in to talk to a shrink, when the problems were so overwhelming in my life, I couldn't even begin to think about them. The shrink had to give me a diagnosis in order to be covered by, insurance. And he gave me what I understand now to be the mildest diagnosis that you can use in DSM.
This is a low grade depression bit.
Yeah, this was what was it? I should actually get the exact quote so I don't misremember it. Here
By
it
the
is.
way, Barry, I think I did achieve the objective by which I asked the question. So
Yeah.
I do know it's beyond the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. So in fact, by the way, this is at the time that the Bell system was being broken up.
I suspected that.
Yeah. So I'll just read two or three sentences. Back in the 80s, before I even heard of DSM-3, I was a distinguished member of technical staff at the Bell Telephone Laboratories in Homedale, New Jersey. About that time, the U.S. Department of Justice moved to break up the Bell system, pitting antitrust law against STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because that was our culture. Law utterly clobbered STEM. The Bell system fractured and Bell Labs rapidly went to hell in a handbasket. During those turbulent times, I went to talk to a first-rate psychologist about navigating my way through a variety of real-world problems for which my STEM education, PhD in system science from Stanford University, left me ill-prepared. After a few months, I received a DSM-3 diagnosis of 309.28, quote, adjustment reaction with mixed emotional features. I asked the shrink what that meant in plain English. He said, quote, it means you get upset when upsetting things happen. Well, yeah. And then I learned
Can I
later
self-diagnose then?
and then I learned later from another professor of sociology that that's the mildest diagnosis that qualifies for coverage. It's basically saying something traumatic happened in your life and you had to adjust to it. And the adjustment was difficult and you had some, strong emotional reaction to it. Well, yeah, being told that your whole career is against the law, that your company that you're working for.
No. Let's go back to that.
Law clobbered STEM. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Barry, I appreciate you actually being patient enough to attempt to answer my question.
I'll give you the link if you want to read the rest of the that's embedded in the middle of just so that you can see. And you can look at the date on this, by the way. I mean, this is not something I wrote yesterday. This is something I wrote, when DSM-5 came out, 2013. Title of it is To Hell with DSM-5, because they basically changed the function of DSM with the 5th edition. It became less of a diagnostic tool, and I don't know, they can't quite remember. Oh, National Institutes of Mental Health decided to abandon the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, at least for research purposes. Yeah, that was the reason. That was what prompted me to write this story and then embed in it this little personal anecdote. So I wrote that in 2013, but it's a story that goes back to late 1980s, 1985, about 1985, I think.
Okay, Bear.
All righty.
Again, thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it.
See you
Talk to you next week.
next week. All right.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye.